Welcome to Transforming Us podcast. I'm Jess.
And I'm Tamara. We're trauma-informed relationship coaches and old friends here to discuss common patterns and what leads us to paths of security.
You know, people are feeling overwhelmed and disconnected in their painful relationships, which often leads to mental health crises.
We want to share some new ideas and practices to help you cultivate curiosity, compassion, and to redeem the patterns in your relationships, starting with yourself.
Join us on this journey of transforming us. Grab a cup of coffee and let's dive in. Welcome to Transforming Us, the podcast where we explore the journey of wholeness and relational transformation. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with a vital voice in the Enneagram space. He's been helping people understand themselves and their relationships to others and God through the lens of the Enneagram for years. Tyler Zach is a certified Enneagram coach, spiritual director, and co-founding pastor of One Hope, a multi-ethnic church in Omaha, Nebraska, where he lives with his wife and two adopted sons. With over 18 years of ministry experience, he's the author of the popular Gospel For Enneagram devotional series, a 40-day devotional which has sold over 18,000 copies. His passion for guiding others is clear in his thriving Instagram community, which is called Gospel For Enneagram. He connects with over 47,000 followers. Tyler is all about helping people transform their lives and relationships. I'm so grateful for you, Tyler. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Jess. Thanks for the invitation and thanks for all you do. Hosting a podcast takes a lot of work and you're giving a lot of value away. And it's costly work sometimes. So thank you for being so generous.
Oh, that's very kind. It is definitely a passion project. You know, we don't do this for any money. It's just one of those things that when you love something and you want people to understand it, why it's so vital, you know.
That's good.
So
That's good.
Yeah. Well, why don't we get started by you telling us a little bit more about yourself, your family, where you live, and what you've maybe been working on recently.
Yeah, I'm here in Omaha, Nebraska, here in the Midwest, and have a beautiful family. Met my wife in college in a campus ministry. I went on staff full time with the campus ministry called Crew for about 9 years, and then during that time, adopted two sons, and then went to Kansas State for a couple of years to direct the campus ministry down there. Came back to Omaha to become a church planter, pastor. And yeah, just had a fun ride for about 9 years, but realized that my family, having a son with special needs, it was just too hectic all the time. And read a book by Donald Miller called Hero on a Mission and sort of reverse engineered my life and realized that in my 40s, it needed to be a different kind of decade for my family. So we transitioned out of full-time church ministry, and I'm doing Enneagram work full-time. So I wrote a book for every Enneagram type, and now I'm doing Enneasummits, providing free events for people to learn so that they keep growing, so that they can transform their relationships, ease their anxiety level, to understand more about who they are and their relationships. So it's been a fun journey the last 3 years doing Enneagram stuff full time.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know personally I have benefited from every one of your Enneasummits so far. They're rich with just experts and also everyday people, panels. And it's just such a great place to learn more, not only about my number, but as a coach, helping to understand the inner workings of everybody and from different perspectives. You've done one on mental health and one on relationships and spiritual formation, which I'm really into. So yeah. And I know by the time this episode airs, it will be after the week of your midlife and beyond. Yeah. But it definitely, you can always access those people. We'll say more towards the end about how to connect with those things. But that's one I'm looking forward to.
Awesome.
So you have been very open, as I've heard you teach over the years, about your own journey of transformation. And Could you tell me a little bit more about how you first found the Enneagram and this wisdom tool and why it was so impactful for you?
Yeah, I saw that one of the churches I had gone to that has a high standard, high bar for theology, they were using the Enneagram with their leaders. And so I said, okay, maybe it's, even though it kind of looks like a pentagram a little bit, maybe I'll check this thing out. And I dove into it. I've always liked personality tests. So Myers-Briggs, Strengths Finder, I've always been a sucker for those tests. So it wasn't hard for me to, check out the Enneagram at first. And once I got into it, I realized, wow, this is deeper and more profound than any personality tool I've ever used.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I found out that I was an achiever or self-identified with the achiever patterns, which is a type 3, I was like, okay, that's the best one. I want to be known as an achiever. And then as I got into it, I'm like, okay, I know I'm a workaholic. Okay, that's a hard pill to swallow, to be told that. But I kind of already knew that. But what I didn't know was that, like, for the type 3s, because there's a lot of different types that can be workaholics. There's a lot of workaholics out there,
Mm-hmm.
but type 3s in particular are workaholics or workaholics with image problems.
Mm-hmm.
We sort of walk around in life with an Instagram filter. We're always trying to filter our words, filter how we're perceived by others. We're always looking for external validation. And some of those things the Enneagram just sort of brought to the surface for me. And it was really challenging to look in a mirror and see some of those patterns in my life. Because, the Bible says that we can suppress the truth. So we can even
Mm-hmm.
read our Bibles and be looking at truth about ourselves right in the Bible, but sort of suppress it and move on and be like, that's not me.
Mm.
But the Enneagram can, as one pastor called it, he called it sniper sanctification. It sort of can put the crosshairs on different aspects of you that you maybe were suppressing,
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't let you get away with some of those patterns. Because it says here, if you're a type 3, here's a bundle of patterns that
Mm-hmm.
may not be absolutely true, but they're definitely patterns, and 75% of them may be true. So
Mm-hmm.
here's some things to take a closer look at. And so for the workaholism, the image issues that I had, the need for external validation, the tendency to airbrush failure
Mm-hmm.
or bend the truth, those things were really helpful for me in terms of just my growth, spiritual growth. And even realizing that, a lot of type 3s make false promises.
Mm.
That's something that I'd never thought about before, because we're always casting vision. We're always trying to inspire hope. And what we do without realizing it is that we're always making promises as we're casting vision. Like, hey, we're going to do this, and
Mm-hmm.
God's going to do this. And other people receive that communication as, okay, you're making a promise, you're going to do this.
Yeah.
And then a year goes by and we don't act on it. And we forget that we had cast all this vision, made all these promises. And so trust, like
Mm.
for other Enneagram types to trust a 3 sometimes is very hard, because we're making these false promises and don't realize it. So I'm just throwing out some different examples
Yeah.
of things I've had to really wrestle through, that it's really been complementary to my spiritual growth in the church and those
Mm.
other channels.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. That's very vulnerable and honest. And I really respect you just sharing from kind of the deep, almost the dark underbelly of, like, we have these patterns, we have these aspects of sin and our, places where we're not yet trusting God. And, like Paul says, we have to put off, I like the old self, new self language that, like, Marilyn Vansell, she's somebody that I follow. Understanding that laying down the strategies that you needed them to survive, but they aren't serving you anymore. Like God has he has a whole true you, you know, that you can explore. And it is a journey. So,
Amen.
yeah. So I can imagine you mentioned that impacted your ministry some. Is there anything more about how that happened in ministry? Or I know the Enneagram has, like you said, faced some pushback in the Christian community, because it's just foreign. People don't understand it, but it's this, like, wisdom tool. And aren't we supposed to get all of our wisdom from the Bible? So you want to say a little bit more about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, right out of the gate, the Enneagram started helping me as a pastor. So I'll just start with that by saying it was just a really helpful tool.
Mm-hmm.
I was a great executive pastor, but not great in counseling situations.
Mm.
And I mean, people told me I was pretty good in those situations, but I felt like I struggled a lot. I wasn't seeing a lot of fruit, and I wasn't getting a lot of affirmation for counseling. It was more of like what I could do, what I could build in ministry.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as I got a hold of the Enneagram and started in premarital counseling with the Enneagram, immediately I became people smart compared to where I was.
Yeah.
And it energized me. It energized me to go into counseling meetings, and I was able to spot things much more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, there was a period of time where I counseled a type 3 and type 6 like 3 times in a row, which is exactly me and my wife's Enneagram combination. I'm a 3
Mm-hmm.
and she's a 6. And, again, these are Enneagram is patterns, not absolutes.
Yeah.
And predictable patterns. And so I was able to tell the threes in the room, like, hey, don't tell your future spouse to just have faith when things get hard, because that's what a 3 does on autopilot. Is we
Mm.
just shove problems under the rug. We don't really listen to a lot of concerns or worst case scenarios and do risk analysis. We sort of latch onto our strength, which is hope and faith.
Mm-hmm.
And we can use that to actually suppress the painful emotions of other people or valid concerns of other people. And so I was able to tell them, hey, don't tell them to just have faith. Like, listen longer to your spouse when they bring concerns to you. Like,
Mm.
so that's just one example of how it helped me to just help people. It just sort of accelerates the process of sanctification, accelerates the process of being able to help people if you can spot
Mm-hmm.
some of those patterns. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I talk in terms of patterns, and I like the idea that you're really efficient and high in some numbers, and you're really low in other numbers, and wholeness sometimes looks like getting a little bit more balance and growing in the low numbers and chilling out on some of the high numbers a little bit and using the skills and resources of the other numbers. And that excites me when I start showing people, opening these doors, showing them paths to security, that you actually could practice some of the skills of your spouse and they can of you. And like, this is where you can meet in the middle, find common ground and grow from one another, which I would imagine in marriage counseling in the church would be so helpful as a
Yeah.
pastor. Yeah.
So then as I was using this tool, I started to hear things, rumblings. There was another pastor here in Omaha that put out a video saying that the Enneagram was an occult tool right here in my city. And Cultish podcast did a thing on the Enneagram. And then Jackie Hill Perry came out with a video reel on the Enneagram. And so a lot of people started pushing back on the Enneagram. If you're in a tradition, a faith tradition that really understands a theology of common grace, that God speaks through creation, that he speaks through people who aren't yet followers of him, I feel like in those traditions, they're more welcoming of the Enneagram and using that as a tool because they understand that all truth is God's truth.
Yeah.
But if you come from sort of a church background, or you're in a church now that is highly skeptical of anything that's not actually written on the pages of Scripture, that doesn't understand common grace, then those are the people who are going to latch on to some of the rumors and the fear mongering and say, hey, the Enneagram is from the devil.
Yeah.
And so the Apostle Paul said to test everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I went on a really long journey to go down to look under every crack and crevice I could find about the origins of the Enneagram to make sure that it was a tool that Christians can be using. And so I came out of that search even more confident that Christians can be using it. And I actually put together an e-course a 3-hour kind of compact e-course to help people get clarity on the origins and then confidence to be able to use it. And so a lot of pastors, a lot of ministers, a lot of people have watched it and benefited from it to really kind of to push back on some of the rumors that you're hearing. Because like Jackie Hill Perry said that she researched the Enneagram for 2 days and then found out it was demonic. I was like, you can't just go on a few blogs online.
Right.
Like that can't be your research
Yeah.
when researching it. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of fear mongering, and it reminds me a lot of the Harry Potter controversy. Years back, some Christian parents like prohibited their children from reading the books about Harry Potter because they feared that their children might start practicing magic.
Mm-hmm.
And J.K. Rowling was asked in an interview like what she thought about these parental fears, and
Mm-hmm.
her reply was great. She said, I have yet to meet a single child who's told me they want to be particularly interested in the occult because of reading my book.
Mm-hmm.
And so she just kind of called out people. And likewise, when it comes to the Enneagram, I don't know any pastors. Like, I can't even name one who became a New Age pastor or got into the New Age or got into the occult from using the Enneagram. But conversely, I can give you a lot of people who've experienced personal transformation, marital improvement, improved work relationships because of this Enneagram tool.
Mm-hmm.
So, for those who are wondering, if you don't want to take my e-course, that's totally cool. In a nutshell, I'll just say that the Enneagram is not an ancient tool. It's a modern psychology tool that was created in the 60s that can be used as a standalone tool by Christians or non-Christians, right?
Mm-hmm.
By therapists or Jesuits, by business leaders or evangelical Christians. It can be a standalone plug-and-play tool. And the good news is that since 2016, a lot of Christian evangelical authors have grabbed a hold of it and have sort of put the Enneagram into a Christian key, transposed into a Christian key. So there's so much literature out there that is through a gospel lens that wasn't there prior to 2016. So there's just a lot of good resources out there for people in the church.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. And I would recommend, I have done your course because I was so curious about, even in coaching, I coach a lot of believers, and it's just one of those things that they've heard things and they're not really sure. And, and then some people really embrace it wholeheartedly, but yeah, I think that it's a great resource to get all the facts and to really set those fears at rest. And what I've found is, when you talk about Harry Potter and just this idea of anything that opens up our wonder and our curiosity, and I think in many ways, like I feel a little bit like a child when I look at the Enneagram. It is a place that gives me not definitive answers or puts people in boxes or things like that, but it gives me the ingredients to ask good questions, to be curious and compassionate about my spouse, about my children, about my neighbors, my coworkers, like all of it. So, I think anything that does that.
Well, depending on what church you're in, curiosity is not looked at as a good thing. Curiosity sounds dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
But yet that is the thing that, as I've been talking to a lot of Christians in their 60s, 70s, 80s in this midlife and beyond summit, all of them say that like the path to growth and the path towards living satisfied in your second half of life is moving from being so certain of the things that you were so certain about in the first half of life and becoming more curious about the things that you thought were wrong or new perspectives. So curiosity is the path of growth. If you want to break out of your old ego patterns, you have to get curious. And that's the only way to build strong, we're going to talk about attachment theory, but that's the only way to actually build strong, secure connections is if you become less certain about your opinions and more curious about other people's opinions. That's the only way to build strong attachment. So
It creates safety, whatever community you're in or relationship, for sure. Yeah. So let's transition to kind of that personal application. You're an adoptive dad, you're married. When you think about the Enneagram and how it's impacted family life, what would you share as far as how it's given you that curiosity, that compassion, understanding?
Yeah, well, the Enneagram, again, is a diagnostic tool. It's not the power or fuel for sanctification. Like the powers in the Holy Spirit, like that's how we grow. But the Enneagram can accelerate those things.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Enneagram didn't make me a better husband, but it helped. If I would have had it earlier on, it would have been a great tool that would have helped me to see myself more clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I saw myself as someone with lots of faith and having the gift of faith, and realized that no, actually, you can use that to sweep problems under the rug. That you can use your strength. Your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And early in my marriage, we went through a season of infertility, and still haven't been able to have kids naturally. So we never ended up being able to experience pregnancy and the joy that comes with that. And so we've had to grieve that. But early in my marriage, I kept thinking, yeah, it'll just happen. Like, yeah, God's good. Like he'll eventually come through for us. And so I
Mm-hmm.
kept telling my wife, just don't worry. Why are you crying? Why the tears? Like, have some hope, have more faith. And that was so painful for her. And that was just a really hard time in our marriage. And just zooming out, I just thought of her as a pessimist. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I loved her, but I would always think to myself, and a lot of spouses think that, because usually one of the spouses is a realist and one of them is an optimist, and Lindsay is more of the realist. But I just thought of her as a pessimist compared to my Enneagram 3 pattern of hope and faith. And now the Enneagram's helped me not to call her a pessimist anymore, but a realist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't call her a pessimist, but a protector. I see her gift of risk analysis as something that protects me, protects our kids, keeps us out of danger, keeps us safe. And so I view her totally differently now, 18 years into marriage, than I did when we first got married. And so I'm able to see her with fresh eyes. And it's also, again, helped my parenting. So for example, threes, we really, and this is kind of, okay, I'm learning new things every single year that are hard pills to swallow.
Yeah.
And one of the things this past year that I realized with my son entering to high school now is how much Enneagram 3 parents want to live through their kids. Like we want them to be mini successful versions of ourselves. And it's really, really, really hard for me that my son doesn't want to be in tons of extracurricular activities like I was, that he doesn't want to be aspire to get certain awards or chase after goals like I did in high school.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy for me to think of him as lazy or I don't know, just not caring about being the best version of yourself. Or
Mm-hmm.
I can sort of do these things and I can sort of push him like, hey, why don't you join this club? Why don't you join this club? And I can sort of push my life, the life that I want him to live, on him. But that's not loving. That's the
Mm-hmm.
opposite of love. It's giving them freedom to choose their own path, make their own decisions. And so I've just had to learn how to back off and let him live his life. And it's helped my parenting with him. It's helped our relationship.
Yeah.
It's also helped me to realize that I'm actually a better parent than I think. Because sometimes when we're parenting kids, especially adopted kids, and like both of our kids, birth moms use drugs, and there's all that whole situation where we're still feeling the consequences of those decisions now.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to their brain, their development, and uh, so both of my boys are very aggressive. They get angry really quickly. They test me. And knowing their Enneagram types has helped me to realize, okay, I'm not a bad parent. It's just that there's some
Yeah.
things here that are normal for their Enneagram types that that I just need to be aware of. So for Zane, he's a counterphobic 6, which means that he tests me all the time. But knowing the Enneagram, I realized the reason he's testing me is because he's wondering if he can trust me.
Yeah.
So the testing is actually a way to figure out if he can trust his dad. So I don't get it. As 3s can be sensitive. We can be insecure. We can take that personally. But now I realize what he's doing. And for my younger son, Zeke, who's on the autism spectrum, he's 8, and he's always really loud and everywhere we go. And I'm tempted to say, hey, you're being too much, or you're being too loud.
Yeah.
And I need to, knowing his Enneagram type, I can say, you need space to live at full volume. Like I can't be I don't want to be the voice in your head as you grow up to be like, my dad is the one who always told me to be less, to be more quiet, to not be the full expression of myself. And so I need to champion that in him, that it's okay to be loud. It's okay to live life at full volume, to be him. So it's helping me to know how to parent him better. Yeah. So I'll just stop there. Those are just a couple examples that I thought of.
Yeah. So much of what you were saying about your adopted son, because I have 2 adopted boys, one in college and one that just graduated high school that's taken a gap year. And, I've a large number of kids who have been adopted and experienced trauma, or, even just being adopted at birth, there's a type of trauma there. A large number of them have what is called that fearful avoidant attachment pattern. So it's kind of a little bit of the anxious and a little bit of the avoidant. And so that pushback that, you were talking about, that testing for trust is so common. And it's one of those things that, when you have a lot of assertiveness in your home, we have that experience of most of our children are assertive types, and they're all old enough that they've typed themselves, and, I'm not putting that on them at a young age, but that type of energy going on in your home when like I'm a 4, I have a lot of 3, but I need that quiet space to like disengage when there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of excitement. I mean, a lot of it's good, but knowing these patterns in your home gives you some of the tools to know what you need, to know what they need. Like you said, you don't want to create an identity issue where you're saying, hey, you're being too much, stop being that way. Maybe it's triggering something in you that's different than your patterns, and you can be aware of that and reframe it in your head and figure out, well, how do I constructively, if something does need to change, speak to them through the lens of their patterns and their fears and, their strengths and their gifts and all that stuff. I've found it to be incredibly helpful in that way, having a son who's an Enneagram 3, and just different things that pop up that it's like, this is so different than how I would approach things in life and college. And then we have one that's a 9 and a 7 and a 1. So it's crazy. And we have a little guy, he's 6. So the verdict is out on where he will fall. But yeah, so what have you found? I know on your Enneasummits, you have explored attachment a little bit, as you've, interviewed different people. Do you have an idea of how attachment has impacted your family, or yourself? Like, are you aware of either anxious or avoidant leanings in yourself?
Yeah. I have interviewed a couple people. I'm not an expert on attachment theory, but I do appreciate both the Enneagram and attachment theory because I think it can help you to name certain things that the other tool can't name. Mm-hmm. That's why I like using more than one tool. Mm-hmm. And it's just really helpful. And I think the secure, you can tell me if this is how you view it too, but it seems like the secure attachment is basically the healthy versions of all the Enneagram types.
Mm-hmm.
And for the avoidant, as I was listening and learning, I'm just making correlations on my own head as an Enneagram coach. It seems like for the avoidant or the dismissive avoidant, I know there's different terms for each of them, but it seems to me that there's 3s, 4s, 5s, 7s, and even 8s that sometimes can fall within that avoidant attachment. For anxious or anxious preoccupied, I wrote down 2s, 4s, 6s, 7s, and 9s as and again, I'm not saying that they are that attachment style, but definitely like, hey, pay attention to this.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the disorganized or fearful avoidant, the 1s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 8s, and 9s, I could see needing to watch out for those. And very, very little research is available on the relationship between Enneagram and attachment theory. That's why I think your work is so helpful. It's a great contribution because it still is so new. And there was this one study done which gathered data from 69 members of the Association of Enneagram Teachers. And this is what they found, because it's helpful to know like what people, like real people, think they are.
Yeah.
It might not be true, but it's what they think they are. For example, for secure attachment, 1s, 3s, and 9-wing 1s reported a significant correlation between their type and secure attachment. So that's just really helpful to know. Like, okay, a lot of the 9s, the easygoing, peaceful 9s, report having a secure attachment, maybe even if they don't.
Yeah.
And then I think for the study, 5s and 7s reported having an avoidant, 2s and 4s reported anxious, and 6s, 8s, and 9-wing 8s. So the other 9s, the 9-wing 8s, said there was a correlation between them and the disorganized.
Yeah.
And again, you can tell me your terminology, but I just thought that was, I think I like studies, but being done like that, because it just helps us to see patterns where there maybe aren't. We don't see any.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I'm familiar with that study, as well as, there's a lot of opinions out there, and nothing ever completely matches up, because the reality is I don't think you can totally overlay them, because when we haven't talked about this yet, but the instincts are so much about safety and security that influences, I think, which instinct you are in your number. So either self-preserving, social, or one-to-one, some call it sexual. But that would impact how you express things. I think stances play a part, in this, when you're looking at the stance of a number. So withdrawing, compliant, or assertive stances, these are going to all be factors in whether a number kind of expresses these different things. And then I also think just experiences, but then experiences shape your kind of presentation of personality, how you're high in some numbers and low in other numbers, or at least that's kind of how I see it. And so it is really interesting. So as I do my work with different clients, overlaying, okay, let's get clear on what you think you are as far as an Enneagram number. And then let's look at instincts. And then let's look at, your attachment relationships growing up and kind of what they look like now. Because, a fearful avoidant would have a lot of that kind of betrayal wounds and the push-pull stuff going on, and the testing, and so, a lot of inconsistency and variability with how you show up in relationships, whereas your dismissive avoidant is pretty consistently, likes independence and likes autonomy, and is just not going to rely on those relationships as much, because they learned very young to manage their own feelings and not talk about it, and less communication, and then what I would call the anxious preoccupied, like you said, there's different words out there for them, But an anxious, preoccupied person leans heavily on that connection and those relationships and assurance. And, like you said, the 4 and the 2, sometimes the 6, you see that in how they're looking for another person to help them feel secure instead of having that internal anchor. And I love what you said about secure attachment being like what I would call almost the most integrated version of a number. So when you're using skills from all the different numbers and you're balanced in your instincts, like these are the paths to security. When you're using your arrows, both of them, the high sides of both of them, you're aware of your wings, both of them. It's all integration. So yeah.
Well put. Yeah, I love learning from you. This has been a really good conversation, and I hope people realize it's worth the work. It can sound like, okay, it's a little muddy when you start overlapping tools, but it really is helpful. It really is helpful to look and to say, there's these different attachment styles, and if I'm a 3, I should definitely look at the avoidant one, maybe first to find out more about that and see if that's true in my life. Again, it's just quicker pathways to transformation and growth.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to real quick, if, as you've written your devotionals, I think about attachment, but I also think about your Enneagram number and your relationship with God and, how each tool to kind of look through that lens of how you're wired is going to impact how you view God and how he views you, how you think he views you, how that has impacted your faith journey.
Yeah. So I love sort of applying the gospel to all of life. And when I got a hold of the Enneagram, I'm like, okay, here's a really great thing to apply the gospel to. And so I would, this is my process. So I would get 30 books on the Enneagram, and I would read all the chapters on Enneagram 1 that there were in those 30 books. And then I would start to think as a pastor, okay, what would God say to this person who struggles with X, Y, or Z? And then that's how I sort of created the books that I created. It was like 40 days, 40 topics of taking gospel truth and sort of integrating it with these patterns. And it is beautiful because all of these books are like basically letters. They're not just information, but it's like, hey, let me speak to you and bring reassurance to you. Like the strengths that you have, the Enneagram 1 strengths that you have, these are affirmed in Scripture. So let me give you these affirmations so that you can feel affirmed in what you're doing. But then also in each introduction, I attack 5 to 6 lies that each type is believing. So it's one way I went about it. So for example, for type 1s, just 3 of the 6 lies are these. Lie 1 that Enneagram 1s tend to believe is that perfection is attainable. That like I can become more perfect in God's eyes if I just keep improving myself, improving the world. And the truth there is, the Apostle Paul, the way he puts it is that we're being transformed from one degree of glory to another. Like it's progress over perfection, that none of us are going to be perfect. But that we can rest in the fact that God is changing us and transforming us from one degree to another. And so it causes the one to, relax a little bit and to have a little bit more of that secure attachment with God. The lie 2 would be, I must be perfect to be good, because they want to be good in God's eyes. They don't want to be flawed. I think of Ephesians, where it's like, he says the church is without a spot or wrinkle or blemish. Like Christ comes and presents us to God the Father in that way. And that's got to be like great news for every Enneagram 1 to be like, really? Because I feel flawed. I feel like there's blemishes. I feel like I'm not perfect. And there's striving to be perfect to finally look good, to become good in God's eyes. And the truth of Scripture says, no, Christ is the only perfect one. But the good news is he imputes his righteousness to us. so that when he looks through his lens, he looks through the sun towards us, and he sees us as without blemish, spotless, radiant, good. So ones can relax that tendency to strive so hard to be perfect, to be good. And then the third lie is that I can't make any mistakes. Like, I can't drop the ball ever. I can't, make any mistakes, because that means I'm bad. And no, God's like, no, look at Scripture. Look at all these imperfect characters. I mean, the Scripture has one imperfect character after another making mistake, dropping balls, and God just continues to pour out grace and mercy towards these people. Why? Because he created us as perfectly human beings. And so what does it look like not to make any mistakes, but what does it look like to be perfectly human as someone who does make mistakes? And yet it's not a big deal to God. He can handle it. Yeah. He can handle outbursts of emotions. He can handle all those things. So, and I keep going through more lies, but that's just one example of how I think the Enneagram and the Bible can go together so beautifully in terms of our spiritual growth and encouragement, and help every single type to see that God sees you, he loves you, he knows you more than you think he does. So that's a little bit about that.
Yeah. I will say my own spiritual director recommended, she's a 4 also, and she was like, you have got to get Tyler's the devotions that he's written. It is like, and the way you described it is exactly just that balm for growing in security and resting in, your identity in him. And just, I think that for anybody listening, we'll put a link in the show notes about, how you can get a hold of these devotions. Because you should definitely, once you know your number, grab your number or grab them all. So, but yeah, let's talk a little bit too about the Enneasummits that you've created. I'm just really curious how that process of the idea to even start these summits came about, and what it's been like.
Yeah. So when I was a pastor, it was about truth for all of life, like the gospel for all of life. And now that I found the Enneagram, it's kind of like the Enneagram and mental health, the Enneagram and spiritual formation. And so I'm trying to do this work of integration so that people can get even more specific knowledge about themselves and about their spouses and about the people that they're coaching, so that anxiety can get reduced, right? We live with so much anxiety, whether we know it or not. Like 4s or 6s might be perfectly attuned to their anxiety, whereas 7s are always running from their anxiety, and they don't realize that they're going so fast because they're anxious. So we all have this anxiety because we don't really understand why things are happening the way they are, why the things in the world are happening the way they are, why we're in conflict with our in-laws, or we just don't understand, and we live with anxiety because we don't know. And the Enneagram helps us to understand what's going on under the hood and what's really going on, so that we can just reduce our anxiety. And so I've put together these Enneagram summits that are free, that are every 4 months, to help people get access to more self-knowledge, more knowledge that will help them improve their relationships. And so it's really fun. I get to do this full time now. So I've spent the last 4 months working on the Midlife and Beyond Summit that just happened. And this next one will be on mental health. So I'll be bringing on lots of therapists, talking about attachment theory again, and all kinds of good things like that. And that'll be in February of 2026. So anyone watching can stay tuned for that event. It'll be free, a 4-day event where you can watch all like 30 sessions. So like 40 plus hours of content for free during the summit. And it's a gift. Some people will pay for lifetime access, which then allows me to keep doing this full time. But literally, 6,000 people will show up and get to consume it for free. And so it's just a great thing I kind of stumbled into a couple of years ago, this whole summit model. And I love it. I love being able to connect experts out there with people as they're, on the treadmill or driving, to be able to get more great access to information.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely have created such a space of bringing together, some of my favorite experts on the Enneagram, and then in other areas like trauma and mental health. And, I've found new people through watching your summits that I've gotten to get their books. And it's just been a really rich place of just learning. Um, and I do the lifetime access so that I can come back to it. And there's a lot of bonuses and, stuff. So I would definitely, for not very much money, you can do that. Anybody can do that. So yeah, we'll definitely put a link for how people can access those upcoming summits and look at previous ones that have been hosted. How many years have you been doing these summits?
So this next mental health summit will be my 8th summit, I think. So about 3 years now.
3 years
that I've been doing these. Yeah.
Yeah. So in 3 years of interviewing all of these different people, what are some of the things that have surprised you most or that you've learned most and maybe there's a favorite one? What would you say?
That's really hard to answer because there's favorites in every summit that I've done. But I think most recently with the Midlife and Beyond Summit, I was brought to tears quite a bit as I was interviewing these speakers and doing panels. So 9 panels with 37 people. So you can go and listen to this people of the same Enneagram type as you that have lived decades more than you, that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And it was so rich, creating some space to listen to these sages on the second half of life and how they view life differently than they did before as that Enneagram type. And what was really encouraging to me was how many of them accomplished their dreams, but it wasn't until the second half of life. Because I'm in midlife now. I'm 43. I'm not sure the audience of those watching, maybe 30s, 40s, but we tend to. It's called the U curve of happiness, where we tend to start strong in our 20s and 30s, like life is really good, and then in our 40s and 50s, we start to hit a midlife crisis. And don't realize that the U curve of happiness is actually once you get past 50 and into your 60s and 70s, that people report a higher level of satisfaction with life. And that's incredible. That's incredible. And so I was listening to other type 3s who have been through cancer, who have been through the worst of the worst, and saying, I made it and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And for all the types to realize, no, you're going to get through life and all these worst case scenarios might happen. And even if they do, it's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. And guess what? Even if you're in your 40s right now, like me, and you haven't accomplished what you wanted to accomplish and feel like, is this it? Is this the end? No, because I have case studies now of people who have started a business at 57, who have started a coaching business at 80, like Anne, who's a type 8. Like there's so much to look forward to. And so that's how this most recent summit has really inspired me and changed my perspective on the second half of life. So it was the summit that I didn't know that I needed, that now has reduced my anxiety about aging and about getting older, to see it as a holy invitation, not just full of holy losses, like Alice Freiling says. So she's a 4, by the way.
Yeah.
But
I know her work.
Some of the ways that I've been inspired recently.
Yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to it. And so a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, my husband and I met Stephen Smith, who is a leader in soul care, and started the Soul Care Institute. And so this spiritual formation journey and understanding what happens in midlife was like kind of cracked open, because you spend so much time building and looking at the outward focus of life and trying to be successful and trying to do all these things. And then there's like this turn where you start I mean, I wouldn't necessarily have called it a crisis, but it's kind of like a going underground. You have to go inward. And I think that's where some of my Enneagram work began, was we cared for my husband's father, who was, he was declining from dementia. And this was just 2 years after adopting, because we adopted our boys later. They were 8 and 10. And, I was homeschooling and trying to think. I had my son Dakota in that time, and he wasn't sleeping. I mean, it was like all of these things hit, and the stresses of life and things like that just kind of forced me and my husband to just like go inward and start looking at what's really there and not just the outward focus anymore. And, I know in your spiritual formation summit, you interviewed someone who talked about the critical journey. And that's been part of the soul care process, is learning there's these stages to our journey with God. And that just because you're at the 3 stage or whatever, and not Enneagram 3, but just because you're in one of these beginning stages, doesn't mean you don't have this whole other part of your life that you're going to experience and feel very different. So knowing that now at 41, I feel really excited. I'm so excited about the rest of my life, and just knowing there is, like you were talking about in some of your interviews, rich, amazing things that you can start in your 60s, So it's just a beautiful thing. Thank you for having that idea and putting all the work into that topic.
Yeah. Well, I feel you on the adoption. Like both of our boys have never slept very well, and our youngest son was up last night from like 12:30 to 3:30, and so then I couldn't go back to sleep, and so there's a lot of sleeplessness that happens. And so I feel you on. I feel for you on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the critical journey piece, I had Dave Schmelzer to come back and talk about the critical journey, because it was such a popular topic the last summit.
Mm-hmm.
And he pointed out that just a lot of churches, and some people might agree with this that are watching, a lot of churches have discipleship programs for stages 1 through 3,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't have tools or space or Sunday school classes to help people who have like hit the wall in stage 4, and then on the back end of the stages,
Mm-hmm.
to help you in a dark night of the soul. And he was pointing out all these authors, like the Teresa of Avila, and all these old authors that are no longer alive. And I'm like, I haven't heard of many of these. And he said, no, these are pastors, men and women from the past, who can help disciple us right now through these seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so helpful to realize that, yeah, we don't oftentimes have resources or channels available for people who are in midlife, who are going through a crisis, who are maybe deconstructing their faith a little bit. But there are authors, there are people out there that we can learn from to make it through, and that we will make it through. And that hitting a wall and going through the caterpillar stage of becoming mush in the cocoon before we turn into a butterfly, like that's all just normal.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to freak out when we hit a wall, because that's just a normal part of the Christian faith. But if no one ever told us that, then it is going to feel like a crisis when we do hit a wall.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. It's really important. And I think those voices, like Saint Teresa of Avila and, just some of these different kind of ancient like books and things like that, they need to be picked back up again so people can hear that wisdom. So I like to ask a lot of my guests before we say goodbye, what is one way that you feel like you are being transformed currently? And that's wide open.
Yeah, I'm being transformed by slowing down, slowing down, almost to the point of being bored at times and realizing and kind of freaking out. A lot of 3, 7s, and 8s, the assertive types, need to slow down for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And it can feel hard, but it's good. Like, I've never been in a place in my life before where I'm like, I can just go take my son fishing this weekend because I don't have stuff on the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
I can go, my neighbors just had a baby. I can run, go to the grocery store because I have nothing on the calendar tonight. And I just have like space for my family and for other people, even though it feels a little more boring or less rushed than it used to be when I was doing full-time church ministry. And it's good. It's good for me. It's transforming me. And one of the panelists on the midlife summit, who was a type 3, said that someone got him a turtle earlier in life. And so then I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to go on Amazon. I'm going to get myself a little turtle figurine here that is on my computer speakers. Yeah. And so when my son comes in and wants to show me a TikTok video of something cool, and just to be able to enjoy that experience with him, now I don't shoo him away, but I look at the turtle, and the turtle's looking at me, and he's telling me to slow down. So just slow down, stop what you're doing, and pay attention to other people around you. Yeah. And so the whole slowing down and creating space for others is how God's transforming me right now.
Yeah, it's beautiful. As a 3, I definitely see that as something that would minister to you in your number, and that energy that you have to push you into the future all the time. It's very real. Like, it's so wired into your physiology that to have a visual reminder, I think, is really cool. So it makes me think about, I bought my husband's an Enneagram 8, and there's this little piece of art of like a tiny little bird. Like, it was so delicate and so sweet and innocent. And I gave it to him, and I was just like, I know that there is this place inside of you that is just so gentle and delicate, and you know what I mean? And he doesn't want to totally hear that always, because as an 8, he wants to be powerful. But when he can find that place, when he can at least visit that, that delicate, gentle, innocent, returning to innocence, it is such a beautiful thing, for an 8. So, yeah.
I love that. And you're so good for each other, being complete opposites of the Enneagram. My editor of my books was, one of my editors is a male 4 who's married to a female 8. So just you guys in reverse. And I always love when 4s and 8s pair up because they're so opposite.
Yeah. And I'm sure as a coach, you've seen how many sparks there can be.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's why I think these tools like the Enneagram have been so powerful for our marriage, because, when that crisis I was kind of talking about, when that hit, it was just like, we needed something to understand what was happening. So, yeah. Well, thank you, Tyler, so much for your time, for all the amazing things you are using your gifts in the world and helping people to grow and transform into who God really made them to be. So, I like to close our show with a blessing. So may you be aware and open to everything that comes to you today, welcoming it all for your transformation.
Amen.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Transforming Us podcast. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation and that you found it helpful. If you loved what you heard, we would really appreciate if you would take a moment and leave us a 5-star review and rating. Your support helps us reach more listeners like you.
And also, don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more relationship content. Then, if you're looking to take your growth to the next level, check out our coaching services and groups at transformingus.org.
We're here to help you transform your patterns and enjoy more secure relationships.
Until next time, in the words of Raoul Shane, you do not need to do big things. Just do small things in a big way. Then transformation will follow you.